The sport of off-road racing is full of incredible stories, wild characters, legends, and even villains. We cover it all on offroadracer.com, but there's only so much we can put down in an article. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper, and that means sitting down with some of our industry's most influential characters and hitting record. Welcome to the Off-Road Racer podcast, a Mad Media production, made exclusively for offroadracer.com. Each month, we'll go beyond the dirt into the homes, shops, and lives of the most interesting and game-changing icons of our sport. You'll hear about their history, success, failure, and everything in between as we pull back the curtain and reveal the stories of their lives. I'm your host, Matt Martelli, and this is the Off-Road Racer podcast. I'm Matt Martelli. This is my brother from another mother, Jim Beaver, and we're here with Miss Board of Directors, Kathryn Reinhardt.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Hey, thanks for having me. This is exciting to be in front of both of you.
Yeah. I know we were joking earlier. It feels like you're the marriage counselor, right?
Yeah, right in the middle.
Well, so you're at a new company, right?
I am. I'm over at Hemmings.
Yeah.
And I was just telling Jim, it's a fantastic place. They've got 70 years under their belt, and this is the 70th anniversary.
Told her, you're not a car person unless you bought a Hemmings at some point, like off a newsstand. Like, I just feel like that's gateway to being a car person.
Absolutely. And that's what we hope for. We've still got publications to this day, even though it's very unpopular for people to actually have print magazines. We still have print. We have events, and then we have the online marketplace where you can buy and sell collector cars.
Awesome. I mean, I prefer print still.
That's like me, same thing. Like, I don't know, good magazine. There's something about tangibly holding something.
Yeah. And it's good for the bathroom.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. I'm not expeditious, but we'll talk about that later. You know, it's funny, though, a friend of mine who's in the surf industry, Vipe Desai, did a survey of the surf industry, and one of the things that entire industry came back with is they want a magazine. So they're doing a magazine from the surf or from the industry perspective. So it's paid for by the industry. So it can be, some pretty cool stuff. So I think that, in certain things that print's still valuable.
Absolutely. I think there's just so much engagement that can happen inside print. And there's still that really nice feeling of it coming in your mailbox. Because right now, everything that comes in there is spam or stuff that you don't even want. Yep. And so having that print is, it just feels good. It's actually happy mail.
And I think with print magazines, it may have shifted a little bit, but it's like good photography is good photography. Yeah. And if what you're talking about is more evergreen, I can pick it up and I can read the article next year and it's still relevant, Mm-hmm. And I think, collector's cars, that's one of those things where those things, it's not like you're selling a, Honda Civic that's going to sell within a week. There's a lot of these, they may have them listed for a year and a half, Somebody can pick a magazine up 6 months later and call, and a lot of times, sometimes that's still available.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's one of those things that I don't think it's ever going to lose its value. It's funny, too, like in certain sports, we've seen magazines like Surfer's Journal, right? And that's become one of the most valuable magazines in that culture.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we've got you here. We're going to talk some Broncos. You've been a big part of the Bronco program from the beginning, but let's talk about what you're actually sitting here for first, because school project it's an all-female Bronco build that's being auctioned off. Kind of give us the background on how the project got started and then what's going on with that.
Well, I'd have to take you back 10 years ago. 10 years ago, SBN went to Ford and said, we want to do a all-female build, and we need you to give us a vehicle. So they actually gave them a Mustang, and it was only about 12 women that participated in that early build, and they built it from the ground up. We're talking paint, wheels, tires, suspension, performance modifications. It was an awesome build, and I was actually super jealous because I was not a part of it. And then fast forward 10 years later, here we are, and we went back to Ford and said, Ford, now we want the Bronco. And they were gracious enough to give it to us. We had about 200 women actually participate inside the build, and they showed up on different build days in California and Michigan. We're talking paint. We're talking, scanning the body. We're talking about installing wheels, tires. I personally went to Milestar and actually got to install the new wheels on the tires there. They actually taught us how to do that. And it's funny because Martin over there was like, listen, you know what? You guys are doing this. I'm not doing this. You're doing the build, not me. And he was really respectful and a really great male ally for us and said, we're really proud of you guys for doing this, so let's go all the way. And so that Bronco is available here. It is in the West Hall, and it's really exciting because at the end of the show, it is actually available to buy on ebaymotors.com.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, so we're hoping to get a lot of money because all that money then goes back to SEMA Cares, which is a charitable foundation just for children in need in the U.S.
Oh, what a great charity. Like, that's really cool. I'm like, now I feel like everything we've been doing here is BS.
Yeah, well, you should go buy it, really.
Like, what did we do here, you know?
Well, you know, it's kind of cool, you know, in talking about, you know, let's just talk in general about women in the industry, you know, and we can talk the racing side of things and how many women we've seen start racing. You and I were talking about the Rebel Rally before we got started, but it's like, even on the fabrication side, we're talking about builders, but I mean, even on the fabrication side, I had a girl last night. She was 18 years old. She was getting ready to graduate high school early, and she came by the race shop because we do the big trick-or-treat thing I was telling you about and let people to the race shop. She came over to the shop, you know, and specifically wanted to walk around the shop. She started talking with her, and she goes, I'm actually going to school. She says, I'm already a certified MIG welder. I'm going to school to be a welder, and like, you know, cute little girl. And I'm like, oh, holy crap, like high five, you know, but she wants to get into fabricating race vehicles and things like that. And here's a girl who, you know, is 18 years old, and that's what she wants to do is fabricate race vehicles for a living. And I'm like, 10, 15 years ago, you wouldn't hear stories like that.
No,
you know?
No. In fact, they'd be encouraged not to enter the automotive industry. No, it's really great to see how many women have really joined the industry. And these are all from all walks of life. They could be technicians, they could be accounting, they could be sales, marketing, engineers, whatever. This is the collaborative place for them to come is SBN because we welcome all these different women from all these different companies. And the fact that they got to work on the Bronco gave them a new skill set that they didn't have at home. And that's really great because that brought value to them inside of their companies, but also to their career and a long-term vision. And we're so happy to have more women coming into this industry. You know, when I came in, it was probably 95% male. And that was something you just dealt with. And having so many women here now is just really fantastic.
Well, and I know I actually haven't been to the Rebel Rally yet. I know you have, but it was like...
You haven't been?
No, I actually haven't been. And I've been a big surprise. I've had multiple interviews and things like that, but I physically haven't been to the Rebel Rally yet. But it's you know, it's funny, though, because it's like when that concept first hit, everybody's like, yeah, it's only going to last a year. It's not going to stick around. And here we are, like, you're telling me you're having full FOMO because you weren't able to do it this year. And it's like, how rad is it that event's now stuck? I know you've been there, Matt. I mean, it's crazy. The manufacturers are now involved. I mean, it's become a big thing annually.
Well, I mean, I could speak to Emily Miller and how much of a badass she is. And also, you know, a woman from our culture of off-road racing. You know, she was mentored by Rod Hall. Yeah. But she's done so much for, you know, women in off-road motorsports. And I think, like, it's a weird thing because this is universal with off-road, right? Like, it shows you what you're made of, right? But it also shows you, like, a path, right? And by challenging yourself, but, you know, being taught things, you evolve. You know, and I think, you know, in the particular process of what you guys were building, you know, you're giving these women an insight that they maybe didn't have before, where they're like, hey, you can do this.
Yeah.
Right?
Confidence.
It's confidence, but it's like just simple knowledge base. Like, you know, it's if you don't know somebody who has accomplished a certain thing, you may not think that that's a realistic goal. And whether you're, you know, male, female, black, white, Mexican, you know, that it doesn't matter. It's like if there's nobody there like you saying, hey, you should try this, or you can do this, and you can take this path and have a career, you know, in something that you're, you know, potentially really passionate about. Right. And that's the other thing that I love, both with you and Emily Miller and other women, is like, you know, Teresa Contras and lots of women that I'm friends with. Like, they're more passionate than some of my male friends that are in this sport, that are in this culture. They're like, yeah, I'm not going to see them. I'm like, why? Yeah. They're like, it's bitching. Everybody's here. All the stuff is here. You know, like, this is like a giant toy shop for automotive. You know, as well as showing off all the evolutions of all the different technologies and vehicles and aftermarket products. So I think it's really cool. And, it's one of the things I'm really proud of with the Mint is that we've had the biggest field of women racers in any off-road event ever in history, and we want to continue to grow that. It is the case that off-road racing in particular doesn't mean that you have to be some big, muscular guy. In fact, in a lot of ways I talk about this, that the male ego in many ways is a disadvantage in racing, because when I get past, I start freaking out. I got to get that guy and start doing stupid stuff. So, I think, we've got a lot of women racing with us now that are, moving up the ladder and becoming, very, very good competitors. Not just the women, but they're beating the men. I mean, I always use Kristen Matlock because she's
fantastic.
She's a savage. She's not only she's winning her classes. She's Iron Womaning. And she's beating the class ahead of many of the competitors in the class ahead of her in turbo. And I think that once, in this particular case, once women see that, they're like, oh shit, I can do that.
Yeah.
And here's this pretty small woman, beating all these men, and she's not switching out drivers,
Right.
It's pretty incredible.
So Mitch, why is this bike so drippy?
It's our 23 race bike. We can start up front, work our way to the back. Bones can tell you about the suspension.
The rear shock is one of the most critical parts of the bike.
Pegs with the titanium mounts.
Kashima coating here.
Anti-gravity lightweight battery.
Young's Modulus.
Horse and a half.
Works Chassis Lab.
More tie than a space shuttle.
Really? I might need that repeated.
This thing slaps.
Slaps.
Oh, you should have told me that earlier.
feel like there's that pause there. It's like, all right, where's the next topic?
Yeah.
I appreciate that because, I have aspirations. I would love to go and race in the men. So on the goal sheet. But, going to Rebel was on the goal sheet, and I was mixed emotions about it. I thought I could probably do this. I have a lot of accolades. I've been in the industry a long time. I've been around off-roading for a long time, and I thought, I got this. I'm going to win this thing. And I remember going to the first training, and Emily Miller asked the group, who thinks they're going to win? Nobody's hands went up but mine. And then Emily was like, oh, I'm going to have to talk to her because that's not what's going to happen. And it didn't. But I learned a lot, and it's a very incredible event because you learn a lot about who you are, what you bring to the table, and it's a very humbling moment because there's things that you need to work on personally, professionally.
Sure.
And I got to do it with Tori, who I worked with at 4 All Parts. And those are the relationships where you had to be nice to each other because we had to see each other on Monday. So I couldn't just yell at her and scream at her and cuss at her. I had to be really diligent about how we communicated. And we had a really fantastic time. But one of the takeaways for me was being able to learn how to be a better partner, a better communicator, a better mother. Just all those things. Those were life lessons that you came out of it with that you didn't know you were going in there for.
Right. Yeah, the challenge of off-road racing is very interesting. We were talking about it earlier with BJ, where it's going to put you through things that are going to challenge you. It's going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to make you want to quit.
Yeah.
In particular with the format of the Rebel Rally, it's multiple days. Like
8 days.
Yeah, it's not like.
And we don't get motorhomes.
No.
We sleep on the ground.
Yeah.
You're finding hidden checkpoints in the desert. It's gruesome.
Yeah, it's a very interesting race format because it is very mentally challenging, and physical as well. But like really the mental part of it of like not losing your cool, not panicking. That's really one of the most valuable lessons that not just Rebel but off-road teaches you is because that doesn't get you anything, right?
Right.
You panic and freak out and throw a temper tantrum, whatever it is, you're just wasting time and energy.
Yeah. I felt myself second-guessing myself a lot because I would see teams ahead and Tori would be like, well, hey, I think the checkpoint's up there. And I'm like, no, my map says here. And then she was like, but there's a whole bunch of cars up there. And I'm like, maybe I am wrong. I would second guess myself.
Sure.
And by the way, in that moment, I was actually right. I was in the right spot. But those are things that happen. And that happened to a lot of women who were building the SBN Bronco. They were like, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. And so some of them timidly rose their hand and said, I guess I'll help, but I'm not really sure what to do. And they got in that garage, you hand them a tool and say, unbolt that. And they were like, okay, I guess I'll figure it out. And there were so many women that overcame that fear and created confidence that they could take with them after the build.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really cool. I mean, we want to see more women in off-road racing.
Yeah.
Really in automotive culture, because the irony of it is that they are also a consumer as
Yes.
well, right? It's
And
not like
sometimes the decision makers.
yes, yeah, absolutely. For you, I'm switching gears a little bit, but for you, you've had a pretty extensive career in automotive.
Yeah.
Right.
20 years.
20 years.
I started
right?
when I was 5.
I'll go with that.
Yeah, thank
I'm
you.
going to go with that. You definitely look that way.
Thank you.
So, no, it's what for you has been the point where you're like, okay, I belong here.
I mean, I think the imposter syndrome still hits me. There's times I go to events that maybe I don't know anybody, and you feel like maybe you're in the wrong place. Maybe people won't take you seriously. I could tell you 100 stories about being in a booth where men would come up to me and said, "I have a question," and I'd say, "Yeah, how can I help you?" No, I need to talk to an engineer. How can I help you? They would actually ignore me, go over to another man, and funny enough, it actually happened when I worked at Magnaflow, and there was this man, Miles Hayden, and he was so sweet, and he goes, "I just drive the truck. I don't know anything. You have to talk to her." And it was just that I appreciated having male allies that allowed me to really have that confidence to know I am here and I have a purpose and I am valuable and I bring something to the table. And I've been with a few companies and I've really learned that experience there. And it's been really great. Listen, I could work in any industry and I could probably make a lot more money, but this is my passion. This is where I want to be. I grew up in Georgia. I moved to California because this is where I wanted to be. And I didn't know anybody. And I thought, I'll figure it out. Well, that was a long time ago.
Yeah. Just 20 years ago.
Just 20 years.
Yeah.
We'll talk about this 5-year-old moving across the country
you.
at some other point.
Driving a U-Haul by yourself.
Yeah. Let's talk, because I know obviously we talked about the Bronco build that you guys have, and I actually walked by it earlier and kind of poked around. I mean, it's a full build. It's not, bolted on some bumpers and call it good. I mean, it's an extensive build, but you've been involved, with the Bronco for quite a while in different capacities. I mean, and being somebody that's been around the industry, talk about the Bronco, the platform, and what it's actually done to the industry. Because, I think it's given Jeep a competitor. It's brought in a whole new demographic of people into the automotive aftermarket and, in the automotive space and off-road in general. But talk a little bit about the Bronco and the platform and what it's done for the industry.
Yeah, I was working at 4 Parts, and we happened to be at King of the Hammers. And Esteban Jennings came over to me and said, "We want you to build a Bronco." And I'm like, "Oh, this is awesome. Okay, how do we do this? What's the timing of it?" And he goes, "Well, we want to launch it at Easter Jeep Safari." I'm doing the math. That's like 5 weeks. What? And he's like, "Yeah, we're going to drop it off, and we want you to build as many aftermarket products as possible so that we can show how modular the Bronco is, just like the Jeep, and we're going to create this consumer demand for it." And I thought, okay, let's do it. And we actually created 30 products for it and had not only a Bronco, but then they threw another wrench in and said, "We're also going to throw you a Bronco Sport." So we had 2 Broncos to complete in 5 weeks. But when Ford calls, you jump. And we became a really great strategic partner for them. We actually launched all of these products through FordWP.com, but we also sold them with Bronco Nation, which is their outfitter for all of the consumer memberships that they have. And Ford was just such a great partner. They realized there was an absence in the market that they could capitalize on, and they used strategic partners like us and RTR and even ARB. And we had these 3 Broncos that we built. We had this great photo shoot, and we also sold a lot of products, but we also created a category for Bronco that didn't exist prior.
Yeah, it definitely created a category. I remember seeing that, and it was really interesting to watch that process because you weren't sure if that was Ford pushing it or 4 Parts pushing it.
Both.
But it looked very congruent. You know what I mean?
It was a collaboration.
Yeah.
It was so great. Not a lot of people get to say they're a strategic partner of Ford, and we got to say that, and we delivered. And I'm so grateful to that Ford team because that translated into me being able to compete and rebel for them. And subsequently, I bought a Bronco Raptor myself, so now I have a Bronco.
It's actually one of my favorite.
I've got a Bronco Raptor I'm building right now. So
it's one of my favorite OEM cars that I've tested ever. Right, was the Bronco Raptor, and I took it out to Ocotillo. We beat on it for 2 days, and I wanted to see what the failure points are. To me, that's like kind of fun. It's like, okay, they didn't think about this, and I really couldn't find anything wrong with it. Like I was really impressed by the entire package. And
Racing against your dad is something that 90% of the racers in the world will never get.
I've accomplished everything I wanted to do, and now he's just like taking the reins. I want to be remembered for being a huge part of short course, not just racing, keeping it alive, helping it grow. If it comes down to the last weekend and I'm in it, the boys better watch out.
Props to Ford for building such a great platform. And, I think it also speaks to this phenomena that manufacturers, sometimes they understand, sometimes they don't, where they don't understand what the market wants. And clearly the market wanted the Ford, wanted the Bronco. Yeah. And I think it's a wake-up call to some of the other manufacturers that, if you just keep recycling the same stuff over and over again, one of the other manufacturers is going to come along and do something different that's better, that the consumer actually wants, and they're willing to pay more for it. So
and wait for it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it goes back to again the launch of the Raptor originally, and I remember, talking to those guys and in particular Jamal Hamidis, who was head of the program at the time, and he's like, well, do you think we're going to sell 2,000 of them? And I'm like, dude, I'll sell 2,000 of them. You know what I mean? Right. The demand is there. And, but until you make that jump, you really don't know. And when you're, manufacturing vehicles, it's a big
investment.
It's a big investment. But, man, the Bronco's rad. I'm really glad it's here because, obviously, it has a huge heritage in off-road and off-road racing. It's cool. I just love cruising around town and seeing all these people drive around in a vehicle that's capable of going off-roading.
Absolutely. And that's what's so great about the Bronco is you can go anywhere with it. I take it to pick up my kids from school, and I can take it to the desert and rip around.
One of the cool things is kind of a takeaway from what you said, and then Matt and I were on a panel earlier today that was basically the future of lighting, and somebody, Marcus from Toyota, was there with the truck side. And, he was talking about the close relationship that Toyota now has with the aftermarket, Ford now has with the aftermarket. It's an interesting place because 10, 15 years ago, the OEs weren't involved with the aftermarket at all. And now we're seeing them across the board, whether it be suspension. I mean, obviously we can talk about, Fox shocks on Ford's products, or the lighting, Ford WP getting involved with, with the Bronco, but it's an interesting place we're at now as an industry where the aftermarket and the OEs are now playing together.
Now, listen, the OEs are a canvas for us, and without them, we can't paint the canvas. So we really rely on the OEMs to come, and even here at SEMA. And so there are some OEMs that are investing into the aftermarket, but some of them see us as a competitor, and some of them see us as a partner. And what's been really nice is seeing people like Ford come to the table and say, no, we see you as somebody that can help us sell more product and even become a tier one supplier. And now you can actually create the product for us or even private label it. And there's a ton of brands even in this hall that have capitalized on that. And so I think it's really important that the OEMs are stepping up. They're realizing we are somebody that can help them sell more vehicles.
Well, I mean, the aftermarket is really what's driven everything forward. I mean, it's very interesting to see this relationship between the OEMs and the aftermarket, and the good and the bad part of it. But when you walk around, you see the amount of companies here. Small businesses, medium businesses, large businesses. This is stronger than it's ever been. In particular, this hall that we're in, the West Hall. This is all off road. And it's really good to see that the health of that, of that industry, and then to the innovation that they come up with that, sometimes gets integrated into stock vehicles.
Right.
Other times, like you're talking about, it just becomes an aftermarket accessory sold through the dealer.
Right.
Or, just purely aftermarket. So I love that. I love that innovation.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the parts and some of the features that are standard on vehicles now. A lot of those came from innovation in the aftermarket. Yeah. Think about backup cameras. Those weren't standard on vehicles. That was an aftermarket product you had to buy. And the aftermarket created it, and then they integrated it into the OEM production.
Everything. I mean, it's funny when I got my Ford F-350, the tremor, like that was the first thing I noticed. Is I didn't expect it, but I jumped into it, started driving away. I'm like, this is a really good stereo for a stock stereo, right? And so
that was one of the first things you would upgrade, right?
yeah. Honestly, I'm like, okay, wheels and tires stereo. Yeah, you're going through it, right? But I think it's really cool to see, some of the OEMs really kind of digging into the aftermarket and going, oh, what's out there? What should we integrate? How do we pay attention to how people are modifying vehicles? And like we were talking earlier with the gentleman from Toyota, and he was talking about like, he was kind of doing it in a coded way, but it's like he was talking about wiring, making sure that their vehicles have a wiring harness that can accept aftermarket lights, right? And that was never the case. It was always like, oh, we got to be a wiring genius to figure out how to put a couple lights on your truck. Now that's not the case.
Yeah, and Marcus is on the board of directors with me, so I get to see him all the time.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear, his take and the way they view things and view the industry and moving forward. And I think, and I don't know if it was COVID or what it was, but it was like there was a pivot point a few years ago with our industry. And it's like, I feel like if you look at the way we were heading and you look at the place we're at now, it's completely different. I think the next probably 3 to 5 years with the aftermarket is going to be really interesting to see. I mean, just there's a lot of regulation going on and things like that. Government's trying to do things, but just the OEs and the aftermarket together, attempting to do things in a different way also. So it's going to be really interesting, next half decade, I think, with the automotive aftermarket.
Yeah, this is an industry that comes together and thrives. While we are competitors in different realms, we're also collaborators. And together we figured out how to have this bigger voice so that we can fight regulation and legislation that's happening. That's why SEMA has this pack where people can donate, and now we can solicit voices to vote on topics that are important to us. But it's still evolving. This is SEMA's 60th anniversary right now. And that says a lot. We've been around for 60 years. I don't know if you guys know this, but SEMA Show actually started in Dodger Stadium.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was a handful of manufacturers that exhibited, in the concession area. And that was it. And then it's slowly grown from there to Anaheim and now Las Vegas. And to see what it was then and to see it now, and Matt, to your point, this West Hall didn't even exist 3 years ago.
No.
And so to see how big the truck market has taken over, there were manufacturers begging to be here instead of in the Central Hall, which has always been the most popular hall.
And it's funny, like coming here year one with this hall, I mean, there was empty spots and, and they were putting just random tables in them and stuff like that. And literally 3 years later, this thing is slam packed.
It's
full, and it's just crazy how quick it's grown. Because I looked and I went, well, this isn't good. 2 years later, 3 years later, I'm going, oh man, this should have made this, double the size.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny. I went to talk to the Nissan guys, and I assumed they were in Central Hall. So I'm walking around Central Hall going, hey, where are you guys at? And he goes, West Hall, of course. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay.
Wow. Right? Yeah, I mean, that's why Ford's here, right?
Yeah, Ford's here as well. Like, it's just reprogramming. And but it's good because it's giving us a space as off-road to really have the room to showcase stuff rather than being stuck upstairs in the East Hall or whatever it was.
Yeah, the South Hall, yeah.
Yeah, South Hall in the back, whatever it was. But, it's really cool. One of the questions that I have for you, though, is like, for what advice would you have for women who are trying to break into the automotive market?
If you're passionate about it, go for it. One of the things that I've learned over the years is to ask a lot of questions. Nobody thinks you're dumb. Nobody thinks you're inexperienced. If anything, they think that you really, really care because you're asking as many questions as you can. And honestly, find an alliance. Kind of like, the TV show Survivor. Find your alliance. Find people who are going to support you. And that can be in a whole different, areas and realm. But find people that you can go to with questions, people that will give you the intelligence you need to be a successful participant. And I've had some really good alliances I've had over the years, and a lot of them have been women. Women have given me more chances and more opportunities, and that's just because of being good collaborators with them. One of the best compliments I ever got was when in a room where I wasn't there, and people were talking positively about you and recommending you for different positions. I can't tell you how many jobs I've got because of coming to the SEMA show. And for women that want to come in this industry, there are plenty of room for you. Do not feel like you're not a part of it, that you're not male and you don't have the experience. You can learn that. You can be a part of it. But if you're passionate, I can't teach passion. And if you're a woman that needs help, call me. I'm happy to be that person to help.
Those are great words of advice, and I agree with you. I think that passion is everything, and again, it's showing young women the examples of success, so that they can aspire to be like you, to be like Kristen Matlock, to be like a whole host of women that we have, whether it's racing or whether it's on the business side. Like, I just heard the news about Walker Evans. I guess last week he had a stroke. He's not doing very well. But his wife, Phyllis, she's like the unsung hero of his career, right? She was the primary drive for a lot of the things that he did in his career. And nobody knows who Phyllis is unless
you know.
Yeah, if you know them, then you're like, I know who Phyllis is, right? But there's a lot of women in our industry that have helped innovate, drive things forward that maybe, should get a little bit more credit than they've gotten.
Yeah, I mean, all of our spouses, really. I mean, I think about your wife and how, she supports you. Those are people that are important to us that support these things that we go do. We leave the home and we are gone for several days. We miss Halloween.
Yeah.
Like all these things that happen, those are important people that really drive us all forward.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So make sure you thank your wives.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's great. So, for you here now at this show, like, is there something you've seen that you're like, okay, that's really cool?
There's so many great stuff here. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint one or another. I mean, obviously, I'm a Bronco fan. What I really loved is SEMA put together a green Bronco that is sitting in SEMA Central. And I don't know if you guys know this, but SEMA Fest is happening this Friday and Saturday. It's a big concert festival. They built that Bronco for Imagine Dragons, who is the headliner. And so they're actually going to take that Bronco and receive it.
That's cool.
And it's going to be really cool to see them actually kind of be a fringe consumer into our industry who maybe is not somebody that would ever pick a Bronco. But now they've seen what we can do, and now they want to be a part of it. So all the Broncos here are pretty fantastic. There's just so many great vehicles.
I think Ludacris is going to be pissed that they got the car, because he's a car guy, right?
Yes.
So, like, it's funny when I saw the lineup, I'm like, oh, that's a car guy. Oh, I don't know anything about these guys, right? So it's going to be interesting.
I'm actually excited that Bush goes on at 4, so that's, I can actually see him before my bedtime. That's when you know you're old.
Right? I thought you were only 25.
Well, yeah.
There's a concert tonight, some place in Vegas, and I had a buddy, hey, we're going to go watch this band at this bar. And I go, well, what time? Is this like a 2 a.m. close, or is this like a 10 p.m. and I can still be to my hotel room by 11? And he goes, man, you're old. And I'm like, you're older than I am, dude.
It's hard. And these days are really long. You're on your feet all day long. It's 4 days. And if you are part of setup, you're at 6 days. It's a lot.
It's funny, though, because, like, I don't, like, by the end of the day, it hits me, right? Like, once I stop moving, I'm like, boom, done, dead, right? And then I pop back up. I'm an early riser, so I pop back up at 5:30, and I'm like, all right, we got to wait till the show opens, right? There's so much cool stuff to see here, and, like, the automotive enthusiast kid in me, I just walk around, I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. I'm, like, talking to people. I'm like, wait, I got to go to a meeting, So it's like you can never spend enough time here. But yeah, it's definitely long days. There's a lot to see here.
There's over 1 million square feet here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so massive. And you obviously have to wear comfortable shoes. You have to figure out how to navigate these crowds. There's a lot of people here.
Yeah.
We're actually rivaling 2019 numbers.
That's great.
That's how popular the show has come back after COVID. And so it's great to see all these people back, all these companies exhibiting here and paying money to be here.
Well, I think too, like, COVID did something to us where we didn't have this, right?
Yeah.
And once you hear everybody complain, SEMA, we got to be there for a week and all that stuff. And then when you don't have it, you're like, okay,
I miss it.
Yeah, we want it back, and we want it, bigger and better. And then now with the SEMA Fest, like, that's open to the public, which is really cool. It gives gives the public a little bit of view of
What's
the
inside.
show and all the things that are inside. I'm excited to see that. That's going to be a great format to bring people in.
Well, I think it brings in a whole nother demographic too, and automotive, I guess the aftermarket, car culture, however you want to say it, spans so many different generations, and it's one of those things that, I love it because you can have a 16-year-old kid, talking cars with their 80-year-old grandpa.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that's great about car culture, whether you're talking off-road or cars in general. It spans generations, but I feel like SEMA Fest brings in a younger demographic, a younger generation, and I feel like that's SEMA opening their arms to this next generation of car fans and things like that, saying, come on, and maybe SEMA Fest is a gateway to, becoming a SEMA member, and you know what I mean, and going down the rabbit hole of SEMA, which I mean that in the best possible way.
No, Jim, I feel like you're on the SEMA board of directors with me, because that's exactly what we talked about. It was literally creating a marketing funnel for more people to come into our industry. Listen, today's kids, the automotive industry is competing with the cell phone. We're competing with games and people that maybe don't even want to get their license anymore, which is unfathomable to me. Yeah. But it's nice because this festival really allowed them to come into our funnel, experience vehicles, experience festivalization, and then hopefully become a consumer, and hopefully in the future become a SEMA member, and maybe even be one of our employees. It's a perfect funnel to drive people in, and that's what SEMA Fest was literally created to do. So thank you for saying that.
All right. That wasn't a paid placement.
No, it wasn't. You nailed it.
I think it's a really good idea because when you look at the culture has suffered in a lot of different ways with the failure of different car shows. Like I'm not 25, so I was born in the 70s. And, the cool thing about that is I got to see all these big car shows, both from the Midwest, from Detroit, and then moving out to the West Coast and seeing all the big truck shows in Arizona and California. And they were massive, right? And that created a scene and a culture where the automotive part of it was almost like a byproduct. It was like, I just want to be in this scene and hang out with these people. And if I got to have a mini truck to do that, cool.
I'll do it.
Right? And then, then you became an automotive enthusiast through that process. And a lot of those shows aren't here anymore. And it's a bummer. So I think the more that we can do to get people engaged, to touch and feel the vehicles and learn too, like the Bronco program that you were talking about, like touch and feel it, fix it, break it, go through this whole thing and really fall in love like we all fell in love with automotive. The better off we're all going to be. I think you're right that social media, cell phone, the internet, all these things have tricked people into thinking that they're having experiences, but they're not really having that experience. We were talking earlier with BJ, and I remember this conversation where I wasn't doubting NHRA, but I was like, yeah, it's cool. I've been to them. It's cool. But I'm not into it. And Robbie Pierce, one of my good friends who's now passed, he made me go to an NHRA race, and he's like, no, you're going to stand directly behind a top fuel car and you're going to feel this. Right. And it was like Godzilla yelling at you with tear gas, breath, and it was mind-blowing, right?
That's a great description.
Well, it's funny, though. It's the same experience with me when I had Antron Brown and Steve Torrance in Star Car. They brought me to the Las Vegas, the spring round right after the Mint, and they'd raced. And they're like, you've been to NHRA, but you haven't been to NHRA with all access. And I'm standing in the water box, same experience. Yeah. I'm like, I didn't know if I was dying or living or what, but it was the greatest experience ever.
Yeah, it was the most insane demonstration of power I've ever been near, right? And it was radical. I was like, after that, for the whole day, I was like, high. I'm like, this is rad. We need to copy this in off-road racing. And then I drove everybody crazy for the next month because I'm like, you know what they do in NHRA? They're like, shut up, Matt. we heard you the first time, right? But no, it was really cool. And back to the SEMA Fest thing, it's like, that should be a tour. You know what I mean? No pressure, but
yeah. We've heard that one.
It should go to every major automotive market in the country and get people riled up about, automotive culture.
Well, that's why supporting your local car show is even so important. Just going down, attending, getting inspired, meeting your local community. That was kind of what car culture was all about, was meeting your community. And you're right. They're utilizing their phone. They think they're having an experience, but they're not. And they may not even be talking to someone real. So, yeah, I mean, the car culture is great. Being here at the SEMA show is fantastic. The fact that we even get to do this for a living and get paid to talk about car parts all day long is
rad.
just, that was my hobby that I got to turn into a career, and I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah, no, same. It's an interesting dichotomy because, I think about where I grew up and, actually an automotive manufacturing town, and then moved to the West Coast and got dropped in the middle of off-road culture. And as a young male, I'm like, hey, this is pretty much heaven. I've hit the jackpot, right? And now I get to do it as a career. It's pretty awesome. I mean, yesterday we were announcing that Ivan Stewart's our grand marshal, and so just being able to hang out with Ivan and have him know who I am, is pretty mind blowing.
That's one of those. I grew up in Parker, so I was immersed into off road at a young age with a dad that raced. But it's Ivan. It's the same thing. It's when he walks up and he goes, "Hey Jim, how's it going on?" I'm still this day, I'm oh, Ivan Stewart knows who I am.
That's cool.
No, that's great. Well, I'm sure you're a little busy, right? Yeah. So we'll let you get back to business. We really appreciate you taking the time with us.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great. It's really nice to talk about all of these really great topics and to sit with two really important people in the off-road industry. I feel honored to even be here.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.